Hello, this is Aoife. This is the Happy Weight Podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in. This episode is going to be about how you know you're on the right track, how you know you're becoming slim, how you know you're moving away from all the issues you had with eating. And the issues you had with eating and your body are what caused the excess weight in most cases. If it felt like an unnatural weight, if it wasn't happy eating, if it wasn't a happy relationship with your body, no doubt that would have had an effect on what weight you are, not in a good way. And so today's episode is, how you know you're breaking free of all of that and you're creating a new future for your body. And you know you're creating a new future with your body when your behaviors are now different than they used to be. And your reactions are now different to how they used to be. And I've had a very good week of it in terms of clients. Like, I'm actually a bit of a victim of my own success because around, 6 years ago, like the 12-week program was always the 12-week program. Like, everyone pretty much needed 2 calls a week for 12 weeks and that was it. And now there's a way more of people not needing 2 calls a week. So people could be on week 7, week 8 or whatever. And then they only need 1 call a week. And then they only need every 2 weeks a call I don't mean to sound patronizing, but I always feel like a mom who's saying goodbye to her kids going off to college. I'm kind of like, oh, I'll miss you. But at the end of the day, that was the whole point of the program. The whole point of the program is someone gets up and running with a new cool way of eating and they're free of issues and they're just moving forward and their body is letting go of the weight that came from an old way of eating and they don't need to talk to me anymore or they don't need to talk to me as often because they're in such a good place. And so I just had kind of back-to-back calls so far this week of people like that. And I've been doing this 16 years. So kind of within the first few minutes of a call, I know how someone is. Like, I don't need to see a food diary. A food diary actually tells me very, very little. I suppose it's kind of a corny saying, but your attitude predicts your altitude. You know, how you're feeling now is showing you where you're going to go next. And like, we could have had the lowest calorie, days ever, but we might be in an awful, doubtful, anxious, horrible place. And if we're comfort eaters, well then, sure, we're definitely on borrowed time. If that anxiety, if that doubt, if we're calling ourselves failures, if we're kind of saying stuff like, I shouldn't be this weight, whatever, we are going to be overeating probably within 48 hours. And then we could have had the worst few days of eating, but we're now in a positive place and we can put it all in perspective. And that's going to mean better eating over the next few days. So someone's attitude and their mood is always the most important thing for me. That's how I always know, whether someone is where they need to be continuing with getting results. So the first one is they're chill. They're very chilled out. And I know I'm kind of almost hearing that now as the old me that used to have weight issues. And I'm like, what frickin' annoying advice. Obviously, if you've got a ton of fear about your eating and your weight, someone saying just chill out is not very helpful. It's not very helpful. But I suppose I'm saying this, right, because I think it's really important that we familiarize ourselves with what the finished product looks like what the us without a weight problem is going to be like. And I don't think it's a journey, actually. I don't think there's ever trying. There's just being or not being. And per moment, we can be the version of ourselves that has a weight problem, or we can be the version of ourselves in the future that would not have a weight problem. And I think, having that clarity on what someone without a weight problem would be doing, would be thinking, would be feeling and wouldn't is very helpful, right? Because say there would have been times where I would have been like, let's just call a spade a spade. That was a disgusting amount of fat and salt you just ate. That was a disgusting amount of food you ate and you have a problem and there's not a hope you're moving forward now or whatever. And if I was talking to myself like that, when I was overcoming things, I had to be as straightforward as like, okay, right now, am I thinking and reacting like a slim person or like someone with a weight problem? And that not chill, negative, dramatic, I'm so separate and different and wrong kind of reaction is always us being in the weight problem. So the reason my first point here is they're chill, because if you ever have a moment where you look at a photo and you freak out, or you think back on what you ate yesterday and you freak out, or you put on jeans and they're really tight and you freak out, just remind yourself in that freaking out moment, you actually do have the option to think differently and to react differently. And your strength in choosing a different reaction now will actually be you choosing a different future for yourself. Because we can stay in a weight problem for years because we're always thinking, oh, it'll be easy to be positive in the future. And it's like, no, the future is never coming. It's now. It's in moments like this where we usually freak out about what we ate or what we look like in a photo or what our jeans are like. It's in those moments right now, today, we have to choose to be different. It will never, ever be easier to choose a different response than it is today. In fact, I used to always say to myself, once I figured all of this out, actually, if you don't change your reactions today, it's only going to be harder. Because the longer we're in the old mindset, the negative mindset, we're probably slowly gaining weight. So however hard it is to be positive today, it's going to be a hell of a lot harder to be positive when we're up another stone or up another 2 stone. So that's why today is always the day to have a chill reaction. And that, like, all of this is like really feels like we're going against the grain, because it's like we have to practice being chill before we feel chill at all. So it's a real start before we're ready, just like achieving any goal requires starting before you're ready. So yeah, so to I suppose be inspired by that chill response that someone without a weight problem would have. The next thing I notice clients who are kind of fixed, how they look at things, is that they see the bigger picture now. So like worst case scenario with our eating, we're kind of like, oh, I had a share bag of Maltesers, so now it's a bad day. Oh God, it's a bad day now, so I better eat whatever. So when someone's in a good place with eating, they see the bigger picture. So it's kind of like, yeah, work wasn't great last week and they had a good bit on Wednesday night, but like, no big deal. Like on the scheme of the week, on the scheme of the month, on the scheme of the year, doesn't actually matter. Like, and you know, this whole thing with overeating is, it's generally not great crack anyway. Like it's not great crack going to bed over full. So someone who's in a better place now can be like, yeah, Wednesday was probably, you know, I was probably triggered by work and I probably ate a bit more or whatever, but they can kind of see it all in context. And they wouldn't have any of that, oh, so because I messed up the day, now I might as well keep eating. Or because Wednesday wasn't really good, now I'm in a bad phase and the whole week is bad. They don't see it like that. And part of the reason they don't see it like that is because they're more compassionate for themselves and they're more understanding and they've learned to see things with a more learning attitude. You know, the whole like, why was it that I ate more on Wednesday night and not Tuesday night? So they're learning about themselves and they're learning about triggers. And, you know, when someone's like, oh my God, I ate Maltesers and now it's a bad day, you know, they're not really digging deeper into the causes of things. Because when we're learning about the causes of things, then we can be like, I'm actually happy in a weird way that I ate more on Wednesday night because it really taught me I can't go through days like that again. I can't, you know, I don't know, skip lunch at work or not bring anything to work or, you know, go without a break or whatever the thing was that led us to overeating that night. Like it's a learning outcome, actually, if we, you know, that it didn't go well. So it's actually kind of a good thing rather than a bad thing. So probably under that point as well, stuff happens, but there's kind of an immediate recovery time. So like I said, you know, in weight issues, someone could have guilt and remorse and shame and overanalyzing it and totting up the calories and reliving it and reliving it and reliving it. But like I said, people without weight issues or when they're coming out of them, they can start being compassionate, seeing things in context and therefore not have a recovery period. Because see, the thing is, the self-flagellation phase, you know, when you're feeling really bad about what you ate and you're really judging yourself and you're really afraid of the weight it's going to cause, like when you're feeling like that, you're not going to be having a positive time with food. you're not going to be mindfully eating things. You're not going to be like discerning about foods. You're not going to be like, ooh, belly, what do you feel like eating? You're going to be in fight or flight, basically. Like, I heard it put very well today that, like, you know, when we're being mean to ourselves, we're putting ourselves into fight and flight. And that's why gratitude is so important, because with gratitude, we're releasing oxytocin. We're like centered, we're present, we're calm, we're more intelligent. So without that self-flagellation, there's just no recovery time. They're instantly forgiving of themselves. So therefore, it's just on to the next. So even if their belly feels full or hungry or indifferent, they'll be just making the next logical step to have a lovely day with food and eating. And the next one is they trust. There's two ways here where we trust. They trust that what they need in any given moment is what they need. So, like, I suppose it's trust versus control. So control is, I should have this at this time, and, you know, probably permission-based eating, like as in it's 8 a.m. so I'm permitted to have my breakfast, or it's Saturday night so I'm permitted to have a takeaway. And someone with trust then, it's like they know food is never going away. So I had one client there last week, and it was annoying for her because she was listening to her belly and her body, right? And she wanted a glass of wine and nachos, which was kind of an annoying time because she was with her mother, who definitely has eating and weight issues and would have, you know, been a main origin for my client's issues. She's so controlling and judgmental with food. But my client wanted to listen to her body. So despite her mom really looking at her and really judging her for having a glass of wine and nachos, she did. And she loved them and she enjoyed them. And then on Tuesday night, when she was back in her own house, you know, her mind was like, come on, you could have wine, you could have nachos. And she's like, do you know what now? I feel like a cup of tea. That's all I feel like is a cup of tea. And that's what no one realizes, like our ability to trust when we know nachos and wine would taste and feel really good in our body now. That like in 20 minutes time, we genuinely would feel way better for having them. Our ability to trust that and to recognize those signals is equally what gives someone the ability to trust and recognize, yeah, I don't feel like wine and nachos now. They wouldn't make me feel good in 20 minutes. And also the trust in ourselves that like, do you know what? I'll have wine and nachos now. Our ability to do that means that we don't need to force ourselves to eat wine and nachos just any time they're around the place, because we know when we want them, they will be there for us. So that's a huge change. And I had another client as well, and it was a similar kind of situation. I think she was with her sisters in Kerry, and they had, she had had a nice breakfast, just whatever felt well in her body. And I don't know, whatever situation they were in, the friends or the sisters were kind of like, oh, come on, we're here, so we get to have fish and chips. But my client wasn't long after breakfast. And I think those girls as well had been like, come on, we've burnt loads of calories or whatever. So, you know, we get to have fish and chips. But my client is like, yeah, I can have fish and chips whenever I want. But right now, like my breakfast is still very much sitting in my belly. And if I added fish and chips to that breakfast, I wouldn't be feeling nice. Like I can have fish and chips tonight. I can have them tomorrow. So she didn't need to do permission-based eating, whereas the people she was with kind of were like, come on, we're allowed, we're here, you know? And so that's a big difference as well. And then the next one is trust in food being there later. So you can sit around out. So I had another client, and she was away, and it was pretty much breakfast in the hotel, like all the meals were out. So there was times then that she just wouldn't have been hungry for lunch because breakfast would have been big and they were definitely going somewhere gorgeous for dinner. And she really didn't mind sitting around out because what she was focused on is having a continuously nice feeling in her belly all day. So she had used breakfast to put a lovely feeling in her belly. And she was going to be using dinner to put a gorgeous feeling in her belly and a lovely taste in her mouth. But if she had like interrupted the flow of her body and force fed herself a lunch that she didn't need soon after the late breakfast and not long before the early dinner, she wouldn't have gotten a nice feeling in her belly. So she was okay to sit around out. Like that wasn't her missing out. That wasn't her being good. And that's the great thing about someone moving to the other side of a weight problem, is that actually having an extra lunch sitting in your system, making you feel heavy or bloated, and it absolutely being a waste of time and a waste of food because it didn't make you feel better, that actually starts becoming a punishment, not a prize. Because when we're dieters and when we're restricted in foods, we can be like, oh, come on, I can justify this, or, oh, come on, I'm on holidays, I deserve it, or, oh, it's Christmas, I deserve it, I'm allowed it, or whatever. Whereas when we're just focused on the feeling that's going to be in our belly, that's not a prize. That's not a prize to have a whole extra meal. So for the next 3 hours, we have to be carrying around this weight that we didn't even need or enjoy. That becomes a punishment, not a prize. And another, I suppose, client story from the week, because, I do a huge initial visit with a client. Like it's an hour and a half of information, and it's like a 50-page folder. And then there's like a resource area on the website. So it's like they literally have hours and hours and hours of content from me, and it's a lot. So it happens an awful lot as well, that a client would be like, okay, you said an awful lot of things, but what really stuck with me was this one thing. And one of my clients, he was saying that to me last week. He was like, what really stuck with me is there will always be nice food later. And sometimes that can honestly be enough, because us knowing there will always be nicer food later, like there will always be 24-hour shops, or there will always be more stuff in the shops or the freezer or the cupboards. Like, we don't need to eat it all now. Like, there isn't some timer going to go off, and if we haven't eaten by then, there'll be no more food available. There's always nicer food available. So again, in that situation, this person was in a really posh 5-star hotel, and he didn't feel like a big breakfast, like as in they had like, the breakfast to beat all breakfast because it was a 5-star place. But like the thing was, they also had the lunch of all lunches and the dinners of all dinners. So like this guy was like, yeah, there'll always be nicer stuff later. So he was okay to have a simple enough breakfast and not go overboard, because he had just kept telling himself there's always going to be nicer food later. And sometimes I think, to be honest, I know breakfast can be unreal out, and I can't make the hollandaise sauce that, hotels and brunch places can make, but we would be able to get our hands on it, in Cork City or Skibbereen or wherever we are. We would be able to get our hands on a really gorgeous breakfast if we weren't physically able for it, in whatever location we were in a few days ago. So that's something to always remember, that it will always be there later for us. There is never, ever any point putting your stomach in a state of discomfort with needless food, because especially when you start realizing food is a positive. I deserve to have a nice time with food. I deserve to feel well after food. I deserve to be on this, like, okay, this is going to be corny. This is going to be too positive for some people. But like, I used to just think about like, what if life was just one big food adventure? And I always say that to clients when they're going on holidays, like, class, you're going to be on a food adventure. Like, especially if you're in a different country, like you want to have your snout and everything. You want to be like, ooh, what's going on over here? And what does this taste like? And what does this feel like? And what do I feel like after it? Like, we can just be on this magical food adventure. And it's like, that's another reason why if we're planning, say this week, like, you could take on this advice and be like, okay, let's go on a magical food adventure this week. Well, then it's like, you don't want to overeat then tonight, because you've just ruined the food adventure then tomorrow. Like, tomorrow won't be any crack as a food adventure, because your body is just steadily and slowly having to work through all the stuff you gave it tonight that it didn't ask for, it didn't need, and you didn't enjoy. So I think that's hugely important. And another way of looking at it as well is the drugs we get from food. We get endorphins, we get serotonin, we get dopamine. And like, I'm a real comfort creature, and I have a little cat, Jasper. And I'm like, Jasper is a bit of me, because he just wants cuddles or food. Like, he must have some dopamine deficiency, because he's just like comfort on top of comfort on top of comfort. And that's how I was until I understood the best way to get maximum comfort out of food. And the best way to get maximum comfort out of food, I think, is to admit and know I need that big dopamine, serotonin, endorphin boost from food. Like I said, I have no doubt about it. I will need, like it's 5 p.m. recording this, I will need one of those tonight. I will need one again tomorrow morning. Probably will need to get one again mid-morning and so on throughout the day. And if I was to eat loads now, that would really shaft 9 p.m. Aoife, because I have a load of lint balls at home. I got 2 boxes of lint balls in the last week, and I've loads of yummy chocolate at home, and I will probably want some later. And if I was to overeat loads now, that means I don't get that dopamine and serotonin from a lint ball later. Like, I'll be drug free. I'll be like a dry alcoholic or something. Like, I'll be needing my drug, but I won't get it because I will have overfed my body earlier. So now all the dopamine and serotonin and endorphins that we get from eating food when we need it, that's the big asterisk terms and conditions. We get the drug by eating lovely food when we need it. If we're eating when we don't need food, we're just constantly shafting ourselves and going without the dopamine and those pleasure hormones we get from food. So another point is the clients, when they're in a good place, is they're very forgiving. Like, they don't go backwards. You know, I probably have already covered this with the whole, like, they're compassionate, they understand, oh, sure, fair enough, I stress out after work or whatever. But they don't dig up the past. Do you know, like, so when we're in a bad place with food, we really are just constantly digging around for negatives. We're always looking at a photo with an eye for a negative thing. Like, oh, geez, look at the double chin, or, oh, geez, look at the arm. Like, as in, we've trained ourselves to go straight for the negative. And, you know, we're really keeping ourselves down that way. And now we have to be very clear, I suppose, 2 ways of looking at it. One, what I was saying before about you're never trying. You're just either being someone with a weight problem or not being. And if you're digging around a photo to see how bad your chin was and how bad your arms are, okay, you're being someone with a weight problem, and that does have a consequence. You are creating opportunities or a risk factor for needing to emotionally eat later. You're creating a high chance of overeating later, which means a high chance of gaining weight. So that's why, you know, depending on how serious we are about this, it's like you don't get to be negative anymore unless you want to take a day off improving your weight. If you want to take a day off improving your weight, fine. Bully yourself to be damned. Give out to yourself for all the calories. Find all the negatives in the photo. Wear the clothes that make you feel crap. Do it all, but just admit I'm taking a day off becoming my ideal weight, because we can't do any of that when we are becoming our ideal weight. And then the next one I have is that they're competent eaters. So competent eaters, and I suppose eating appropriately, like one of the defining features of like binge eating disorder is like eating an inappropriate amount at an inappropriate time. Like, say, eating 3,000 calories on our own at 10 p.m. at night, that would be like an inappropriate amount of time that doesn't kind of fit the context. Like, it's kind of unnatural. And then the opposite of that would be like a kind of competent natural eater. So say I had a client there last week, she has a little son. You know, the most natural thing to do, the way the day was going, the location they were in, the activities they'd already done, how far they were from home, how much effort it would be to make a dinner when they got home. So the natural thing was for them, and just in routine or whatever, or maybe their little family tradition was, you know, we'll pop into McDonald's. No big deal. The dad doesn't have issues with food. The kid doesn't have issues with food. And now the mom doesn't have issues with food. So that's no big deal. You know, you can overeat anywhere, or you can come out of any place feeling nice in your belly. So that client of mine, she was able to go into McDonald's. She was able to eat something that put a good feeling in her belly. And then she could do it perfectly. Like, I suppose someone with eating issues couldn't do that, because they'd either go into McDonald's with a restrictive mindset, which would be like, oh my God, I'm never in McDonald's. I'm never allowed to eat McDonald's. McDonald's is an exception to the rule. So if I'm here, I might as well go for it. I might as well order loads of stuff and then be good tomorrow. Or else they'd eat whatever they eat in McDonald's, come home and be like, oh, well, now it's a bad day, so I might as well keep eating. You know, all of that stuff. But my client didn't need to do that. She could just have her dinner in McDonald's the same as if she had her dinner at home. She could have a nice feeling in her belly by 7 or 8 p.m, the same as if she had her dinner at home, as if she had her or at the McDonald's. She could go to bed that night with a nice feeling in her belly. Didn't matter whether she had the dinner at home or whether she had a McDonald's. So she's a competent eater. So that's what we need to get to, is that we can have some galaxy and it doesn't ruin our day. It doesn't spiral. We can have a muffin for breakfast. It doesn't ruin our day. It doesn't spiral. Like, everything is a 20-minute at a time thing. So if we had a latte and a muffin at breakfast, and like, say, if we got away with it, i.e. our belly felt nice after it, what we wouldn't do is then create a problem. So someone with a weight issue would be like, oh, well, sure, I've had a muffin now anyway, so I might as well eat X, Y, and Z. And that's creating a problem where there wasn't one, because maybe after the muffin and the cup of tea or whatever, your belly felt grand. But now, just because it's some weirdness, permission-based, oh, well, I've ruined it now anyways, I might as well keep eating it, we would have ruined a perfectly nice situation. Like, the muffin in our belly felt nice, but now, because of our dialogue in our head, we're going to eat X, Y, and Z on top of it. And that's a weight problem, is when we won't just let things be nice. Like, let food be nice. Let it be a nice experience. Let it be a nice memory. Let yourself eat foods that taste very nice when you eat them, and let your belly be well. Let your belly tell you when it's full. Let it tell you when it's hungry. Let it tell you, can I have a bit more so I'm nicely full? Like, let it be nice. Let it be a nice food memory. And sometimes it's as easy as that. And when I look back on my own weight problem, I just see it as a lot of interfering, like me sticking my opinion and my education or what I'd heard into a perfectly natural system that is how my body wants to keep me healthy. And I've worked with enough people for 16 years to know that everybody's body is running in a way that's designed to be their healthiest weight, and it just is. Like, the only issues I ever have when I'm working with clients, the only issues that ever make the program harder or whatever is their self-esteem. They really find it hard to not give out to themselves, and they find it really hard to be hopeful or believe in themselves. But their signals, their cues from their body, their taste buds, their stomach's ability to tell them that they're full, their stomach's ability to tell them that they're hungry, that's all perfect. Like, their body is absolutely raring to go for their ideal weight. It's only ever our head is in the way. So maybe that's a nice mantra as well. Like, let yourself feel well. Let your tummy get what it needs to feel really well in 20 minutes, and don't interfere or override that. So I think I've hit all my points, and yeah, I hope that's really helpful, and I've given you some tips for the week ahead. Thank you so much for listening. Thanks so much for being here. Please give the podcast a review. A little 5-star rating would be awesome. I'd really appreciate that. And yeah, thanks so much. Take care.